Sentencing reform for drug offenders. Is there a balance between strict laws to stop the availability of drugs and a more lenient approach to sentencing? To look at the sentencing reform for drug offenders, I think it is important to look at the history and see how we have arrived here in the first place. Many times decisions are made without learning from the mistakes of the past. In a report written by the United States Sentencing Commission to Congress, they tell us how the sentencing laws were established for controlled substances. In 1951, Congress enacted a law that gave a mandatory 2-year prison term for anyone that was caught importing, selling, purchasing, or receiving a controlled substance. On a second offense, you would receive a minimum of 5 years, and the third offense, a minimum of 10 years in prison. In the 1960s, this tougher stance on drug sentencing became unpopular with the public, and in 1970, Congress passed a law called the Comprehensive Drug Abuse Prevention and Control Act. This basically meant that they were repealing the mandatory sentencing and would establish a more realistic and flexible approach. Now we travel in time to the 80s, when the Just Say No to Drugs campaign was kicking off. The pressure for Congress to do something was increasing. The final straw came when a highly publicized case involving Len Bias, who was a first-round draft pick for the Boston Celtics, died of a drug overdose in June of 1986. By the end of that year, Congress passed the Anti-Drug Abuse Act of 1986. This would take us back to the stricter sentencing structure of the 1950s. When this tough stance on drugs was created over the years, they were trying to create a solution to a problem without looking at the impact that it would have on the prison population. We are going to look at the problem created from the laws that were passed. In a report posted in March of this year by the Prison Policy Initiative, we can see how much of the prison population is made up of drug offenders. Despite the reforms that have been made on mandatory drug sentencing, there are almost 500,000 incarcerations that are made on the federal, state, local, and juvenile systems. Here's a pie chart that shows how much of the federal prison population is made up of drug offenders. This is just the federal prison system. Many people advocate for a solution to the overcrowding of the prison system. It creates a financial strain on the system and the well-being and mental health of the employees that work in the system and the inmates themselves. Reforming the sentencing structure for drug offenders would begin to alleviate this problem. Now that we have looked at the history of the laws that have been made and the impact that it had on the prison population, we need to find a better solution in dealing with drug offenses. Passing legislation to amend the current laws is the first step in reforming the sentencing structure. According to the American Bar Association, the Sentencing Reform and Corrections Act was introduced in 2015 that would allow federal judges to set sentences below the mandated guidelines that had been set in the past. This would give the opportunity for approximately 6,500 federal inmates the chance to petition for a shorter sentence. However, the bill did not get enough traction, and it did not pass Congress until November of 2017. Laws can be amended, but is there more that we can do? In 2018, the Drug Policy Alliance wrote a report after looking at the country of Portugal. Portugal had one of the highest overdose rates in the 90s. A committee was formed to search for a solution, and they decriminalized drugs. If a person is caught with drugs, they are turned over to a commission that looks at the drug history of the person and determines if there is a substance abuse problem. If there is, they are referred to a treatment program. The incarcerations for drug offenses has decreased by 43%. While there has been work done on improving the sentencing structure for drug offenders, there are still more improvements that could be made. Celebrities and some senators are taking more of a stance on reform, and that is making the news and bringing the issue to the forefront. We need to make a change, you and we can do this by voting and letting our elected officials know that there is a priority that needs to be addressed. We can take a compassionate approach like Portugal did and make the lives of people, their families, and our communities a better place. Thank you.